Hello friends, I hope you are doing well. I am checking in from Belgrade, Serbia. It's my second day here. I am once again roaming around, getting a feel for the city. I started my day on the waterfront, walking along the river, River Sava, and I went to a place called Cafeteria and grabbed a coffee, read my book, and just relaxed, took it easy. And now I'm walking to grab food before heading to the gym and then doing some work after. And I wanted to share a thought, specifically around being here in Belgrade. I've had a lot of thoughts on the city itself, which I won't dive into now, but in general, I've had these moments, especially here in Belgrade, but in general in my travels the last 3 weeks, where I kind of pinch myself and I look around and I'm like, wow, I'm here in like Belgrade, Serbia, or like Sevilla, Spain, or Ljubljana, Slovenia. I just like pinch myself and like, what am I doing here? How did I end up here? Especially here in Belgrade, because it's a lot different than Western Europe. It's a little bit rougher on the edges, but still beautiful in its own right and a lot of energy. And it's just an interesting place to be. And something I'm reflecting on is just the flexibility and some of the challenges that come with freedom in making decisions, because right now I feel this beautiful sense of freedom in my travels, where right now in Europe I can kind of go wherever and choose my own adventure, but it's tough because you have to sit down and really be honest with yourself, like, what are you trying to optimize for? What do I want to make out of this experience? And also, when doing so, not put too many expectations on what a given experience can provide, right? And so it's weird because I'm just thinking about this concept that freedom can be uncomfortable, and sometimes it's easier to just hide in your shell rather than embracing freedom and what that can come with in your life, right? Like, for example, that could be a cozy job or a cozy relationship, where if you leave that position, you'll have more freedom, but then you have to have more autonomy and more decisions to really sit with yourself and figure out, what the hell do I want, right? It's very uncomfortable, but that's where we find alignment with our true selves. So it's something I'm reflecting on. There's a lot of layers to unpack there. I do want to clarify that from my standpoint, I feel extremely grateful to be able to experience this sense of freedom, to be able to explore, and I recognize this is not something many people can do. But I just really want to pinpoint that there's almost this sense of sabotage or self-sabotage in which we prevent ourselves from experiencing freedom and becoming the truest version of ourselves, because it's like a crab leaving its shell or a snake shedding its skin. You have to get naked first and really sit with yourself and go through a lot of discomfort. Traveling, I think it's easy to get caught up with like seeking novelty and seeing all these things and seeing all that a city has to offer, and it puts a lot of pressure and expectations on a trip, whereas ultimately there's no need for any of that. As long as you do one or two things that make you learn something or connect with the people that you're with, or connect with some locals or try something new, but really experience it for what it is, I think that's a win, right? I think when we travel, like, we want it to be this like great experience because it's something outside of our regular lives, and it already is. But I think the more we can do to relieve those expectations and really just kind of move slowly through a place and just not just jump from one thing to another, but I don't know, sit down, sit at a park, think about what you just experienced, walk slowly through a museum, talk to some locals. It could be helpful to have more of a less is more mentality. As I've been traveling solo, one of the things I've had to catch myself doing recently, so right now I'm in Zemun, which is just outside of the city center in Belgrade. Just walking around by the river. It's pretty nice. And I get caught up in, like, when I'm choosing a place to eat or like a cafe to sit at, in seeing all of the options and trying to optimize by looking at reviews. And it's so silly because at a certain point, yeah, you want to survey your options and make a good choice, but there's such a powerful balance there, and not getting so caught up in the opportunity cost. Like, oh, if I don't eat at like the best option, I'm not gonna have a good time. And we do this in travel and just in our day-to-day of like always wondering like the opportunity cost, like what are the other options? Like dating is a great example these days because of dating apps. It's so hard to just commit and to work on a relationship with somebody because there's always the temptation of wondering, oh, who else is out there, right? And it's a shame because now, especially in a lot of like Western cultures or just in general, there's this issues of abundance of wondering like what else is out there because we have so much information at our disposal and we know of different options, but ultimately none of that matters. I mean, it does to an extent of wanting to improve your situation, improve and strive for greater things, but when you get so caught up in the opportunity cost of different alternatives, it makes it so much harder to just appreciate what you're actually experiencing. So it's a challenge for myself too, as I'm traveling, to not get so caught up in the reviews. Yes, like look at what's a good option around me, but not get so, caught in the spiral of looking at every possible option and finding the perfect cafe to sit at. And at a certain point, just walking around and just picking something and fully enjoying it whenever I sit down. One little travel hack if you want to eat primo food. So most people know about Michelin Guide, and if you download the app, you can filter to their Bib Gourmand option, and this option will be their value selection for restaurants. So typically, if you order a place that has Michelin stars or go to a place with 1 or 2 Michelin stars, it'll be very expensive, more of a fine dining experience. But the Bib Gourmand is more on a budget and still great service, great food. So yeah, highly recommend. For reference, I actually ate at 2 Bib Gourmand places here in Belgrade while here. I went to Eva New Balkan Cuisine yesterday and got their pork belly, which was phenomenal. It was caramelized, tender, flavor explosion, blew my mind, amazing. And then I also went to Istok, which is a Vietnamese place, and I got I actually went twice, because the first time I just got pho and seaweed salad because I wanted something lighter. So I realized I needed to go back and get like an actual dish. So I came back and I got a chicken saute, their peanut sauce, the sauce was fantastic and very flavorful. And then I also got it was like a shredded beef with oyster sauce and rice noodles. Fantastic. Hello, it is day 4 here in Belgrade, and it has been really nice to properly slow down and just stick in one location for an extended period of time. This has been an interesting choice. That is a bustling city, dynamic. It's been good for me so that I could do a lot of processing. As I've been talking a lot in these vlogs, if you've been following along, about thinking about how I can slow down to better process the details and not just constantly seek novelty. And it's been a challenge just inherently because I've been bouncing around so much. And so now that I've been posted up in one location, I've been able to do different kinds of processing. And earlier I was talking about the discomforts of freedom and how we can be resistant to that. And I want to talk a little bit about discomfort in general and a big reason why I decided to travel as a whole. Is this idea of embracing discomfort. And the funny thing about that is that life inherently is very uncomfortable and full of challenges and anxieties and pain and suffering, and it's the case for all of us. No matter how much money you have, we are humans, we deal with suffering, and life is hard, right? And so it's even harder to willingly submit yourself to discomfort and embrace it. But the funny thing about that is when we embrace discomfort, often we are rewarded greatly. And I'm extremely blessed and grateful that in my life in Colorado, I had a remote job. I was able to live a very comfortable lifestyle. So it was very easy to insulate myself. Like in theory, I could just never leave my apartment for a 3 or 4 day stretch, just get groceries delivered. Like that was a very feasible scenario, right? And so part of coming and traveling is this idea of like getting perspective and talking to locals, which I've been doing especially here in Belgrade, and just getting perspectives for different areas of life, but also just like generally embracing discomfort, knowing that so many fruitful things in life are on the other side of resistance and discomfort and challenges, but we so often stop at that first layer, that first barrier of fear and anxiety. We just stop, especially like I said, we deal with so much of that in our lives that when we have the option to avoid it, it's natural to. We can't blame ourselves, right? And so again, in these travels, I'm trying to submit myself to more discomfort, to broaden my perspective, and to strengthen myself and build resilience. Because I honestly, a lot of the discomfort that I engage with in my life is very calculated, like taking cold showers, or physical discomfort, like doing hard hikes, like Volcan Acatananga, the volcano in Guatemala, things like that, right? Or like tough skiing or whatever. And I wanted to share a little story. I know this is getting long, but I think it's important. From an experience I just had in Croatia. And it's kind of silly because it's ultimately not that big of a deal, but it was a big deal for me. So we were on this boat celebrating the upcoming wedding of my dear friend Mickey to his now wife Zoe. And we were on this boat, and we could climb up to the top of the boat to jump off into the water. And it was about like a 12 to 15 feet drop. And we were jumping in, diving in. A couple friends were doing backflips, and I personally had never done a backflip before. And I didn't know if I had the body control for it, but I wanted to try. But I felt a lot of fear around doing that, especially from that high of a jumping point, 12 to 15 feet. So I was talking to my friends about how to do it and like how they think about it. So the idea is just to put both your feet above your head as you push yourself backwards. So I was just kind of imagining and visualizing what that movement would look like. So first I thought, okay, I'll do it from the bottom of the boat. And first I stood there and I just kind of scanned how I felt in that moment as like a mindfulness practice, and like felt the discomfort of just imagining myself pushing myself back. And I sat with it. I was like, oh, this honestly doesn't seem too bad. And I just kind of thought about it, visualized putting my feet backwards, and then I just had a moment and I just did it. And I was successful. I landed the backflip. And it felt amazing. And in that moment, I proved to myself, okay, I can do it from this lower level. So then came the bigger challenge of actually doing it from the higher level, from like 12 to 15 feet up in the air. And there's just so much more fear because you're climbing up to the top, you're on the edge of the boat, and you're standing backwards. So there's just that fear of the height itself. And the boat's not the most stable. I wouldn't call it dangerous, because if you fall, like, you're just falling into the water. So it's not really that much actual danger. And so I'm standing up there and I'm just sitting with the fear, and there's this moment where it's like you get those butterflies in your stomach. And I felt this many times in my life, especially, for example, like I've done a lot of performance in my life, like as a DJ, or even while like skiing and doing things like that. And it's interesting, that feeling of fear and anxiety is that it's actually very helpful, and it's very similar symptoms to excitement. And you can actually reframe it to be helpful, to know that this is your brain putting yourself in action mode to really focus on the act at hand. And I've experienced that in DJing, for example. Now I've proven to myself that I'm very capable of going and performing, and that now I have confidence. And when I feel that that instance of anxiety before I go and perform while DJing, I use it as fuel to know, okay, now it's time to lock in and focus. And so I embrace it. And so I remember that in that moment, and knew that, hey, I just proved to myself I can do a backflip physically. This fear, it can help me. So I just embraced it. And then I just sat there for a second, took some deep breaths, let the feeling settle, and then I just focused on the motion, and then I just went for it, and I did it. And it felt incredible. It felt like electricity just jolting through my veins. And it was a really, really important moment for me at this point in my travels, just to be bold and just to embrace fear and resistance and discomfort. Like, even when going up and talking to locals, as I've been doing the last few days, like I did at the gym and just like walking around a few times. And it's uncomfortable to go up and talk to people, especially when there's a language barrier, but you got to sit with that flinch, that initial barrier, and sit with it, accept it, know that it might not go away, but it could be useful, and you just got to do it anyways. So I know it's been a long clip, but it's really a central idea in the core of all my travels, both now in Europe and going forward. Just embracing fear, embracing rejection, embracing discomfort, and knowing that ultimately, even if it's not fruitful in the moment, doing these things build resilience, they build strength, they build confidence, they build experience, and allow us to become the truest version of ourselves. You know, the true version of ourselves is on the other side of that resistance. So whatever you're struggling with, it, whatever resistance you're feeling in this moment, just know that it's okay to sit with it. Just be mindful and feel those feelings and just try it. And you're probably gonna fail, and that's okay. So I would encourage you to do that. So I know this has been a long clip, but that was a really important moment for me at this time, and wanted to share that with you. I recently learned a word that describes one of my favorite things in the world, which is Kom Rebi. I don't know the pronunciation, but it's a Japanese word for sunlight filtering through trees. And as a previously avid hiker living in Colorado, that was one of my favorite things to admire on hikes. And really in any moment, I think, I've talked a lot about coming to parks during these travels just to find some peace, especially when visiting cities. But right now I'm sitting under some trees and appreciating the Kom Rebi, and it just brings so much peace when you know the sun is there, but you're still under the protection of the trees. It's a really nice feeling. Also, if there's anything that truly encapsulates what my travels have been like, it's me just sitting on this bench, eating some blueberries, just chilling. Had a lot of time to just think and be on my own. Well, to be fair, I did a lot of travel with friends over the last couple weeks, but especially in this last week in Belgrade, it's been nice to just slow down, get a lot of work done, and just catch up, kind of try to figure out what I'm gonna do my last 3 weeks of travel. Sort of know what I'm doing, sort of don't. But yeah, it's been an interesting week, that's for sure. Belgrade's interesting. It's a city that I probably would have never really gone out of my way to come to, but it made sense in this context, and I've learned a lot. I think in general, the people here are really nice. They're pretty open. One thing that's been a surprise is how many Russian people I've run into. So it was a cool opportunity to talk to expats from Russia and get their perspective on some of the challenges and some of the things that they enjoy about living here. Generally, they've mentioned that it's been a really smooth transition and that they've been welcomed with mostly open arms and there's good community here. One thing that is interesting to me in thinking about is how our borders will continue to change in the long run. And Serbia is a great example of that because there's some issues with brain drain with a lot of the highly educated individuals here, some of which I talked to while here are, for example, if you're becoming a programmer or software developer, you can make a lot more money working in Germany, which seems to be very common these days. And it's tough when you have the highly educated leaving your country, and that's obviously going to affect your economy quite a bit in both the short term and the long term. But it really gets me thinking about the future of borders, and obviously COVID showed us the power and potential of remote work and moving and kind of deurbanization. But it also got me thinking about like network states, governance beyond borders, where you can be a part of like organizations, especially within the blockchain, which I won't get too deep into now, but the idea of being governed by organizations that you are a part of that aren't associated with your borders, but are associated with maybe some groups that you're a part of, whether it's like political or business oriented or whatever it might be. So I'll leave it there because that is a whole rabbit hole in and of itself, but it's just going to be interesting in the next 50 to 70 years to see how much our world changes geographically, and especially knowing with knowledge workers and technology, and myself included, where there's not as much of a need to be geographically associated in a specific location. The world's just gonna change a lot in the next 50 to 70 years. Anyways, really grateful for the time here to truly slow down in a big bustling Balkan city with a lot of culture and a lot of history. But overall, it's been a beautiful experience and has been kind of a funny stop in this Euro tour, but one I'm very grateful for. So with that, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.